Hey there YouTube, Zach Butler, YGO, back with another video. This time I wanted to highlight some cards that are probably going to fly under the radar and be missed by most duelists, or some things to keep in mind that, you know, when you're looking at the format and you see everybody, you know, gloom and dooming about Fiendsmith, Snake Eye, and Yubel and all that, you might not necessarily think about right away. Because while, yes, those are the best strategies, and yes, those will be the most represented things at the NA and the EU WCQ, you do need to keep in mind that there are going to be other strategies, other decks that are playable, and if you aren't aware of things that are going to be happening, that you might end up losing games that would otherwise be winnable. So I just wanted to highlight a couple things here that I'm keeping in mind for the NA WCQ, and we're going to see how it pans out over the weekend. I'm sure we're going to see Fiendsmith probably take the whole thing, you know, either in Snake Eyes or Yubel. Those are the two most powerful decks, but these are other engines and ways to approach the format, I think, that are important to note. So the first thing is going to be the increased agency of Hot Red Dragon Archie and King Calamity and Cosmic Blazar Dragon. The reason for this is primarily because of the White Forest deck, as well as the new support for Centurion being pretty darn good. They got a new tuner / non-tuner, which is always good, as well as a new Emblema card. However, the main things to note here are that the Runic White Forest deck can summon these cards really easily, and that we've seen in strategies like Centurion and the Red Dragon Archfiend deck, as well as Monadium, that Calamity is a problem. We already knew that. Card probably shouldn't be legal, but here we are. Couple of key things to note is that Calamity must be summoned as Chain Link 1 if it's being summoned via Crimson Dragon. It must be Chain Link 1. That means if they activate Crimson Dragon in response to a card, that it will miss the timing because it says when this card is synchro summoned. That is very important. I know that everyone is pretty much aware of that, but it is something that you always want to keep in the back of your mind. So if you can either force out the Crimson Dragon with like an Imperm or something, or you can force it out with some board wipe or something like that, it's going to be pretty bad for them. Also, Cosmic Blazar Dragon, a couple of key things to note is, one, it is very hard to OTK once they summon this card, even if this is the only thing on the field, because it can banish itself to negate the attack of a monster and end the battle phase. That is huge. It also stops negates summons that don't start a chain, so your Xyz, your Synchros, things like that. And it negates activations, which is important as well, because if a card says you can only activate it once per turn, you can go ahead and activate a second one. Key card like that to be aware of is Triple Tactics Talent. Triple Tactics Talent says you can only activate one copy per turn. So if the activation is negated, you can go ahead and slap down another one, and your opponent will feel very sad. Another big thing to note with Cosmic Blazar Dragon is that the cost is to banish it until the end phase. So let's say you are playing against your opponent and you hit them with the Dark Ruler no more, shutting off their Cosmic Blazar Dragon. You activate an effect and they go ahead and banish it anyway. It is coming back in the end phase, so that is something to be aware of, because that can be a problem if you do not keep that in mind when you are preparing your field for the follow-up turn, is that the cost is banish this card until the end phase. It's not just banish this card and then, you know, in a separate effect or something like that. No, it specifically says until the end phase. So that is something to keep in mind with these two cards existing. They are very powerful and may catch you off guard if you are not aware of how the decks that some of them work. The next thing I want to bring up is actually an engine that, if you follow my community tab, you've already seen me mention that I'm very excited about, and it is the Millennium engine. This engine is actually a lot better, I think, than a lot of players give it credit for, although we have seen a few top players, such as Jesse Cotton, mention how strong these cards are. Now we're going to go over each of them really quick and just kind of explain why they're good, and we'll go from there. So we'll start off from the left, which is Shield of the Millennium Dynasty, is a retrain of Millennium Shield. Now, what it does is it can't be destroyed by spell or trap effects. Sure. You can only use each of the following effects of Shield of the Millennium Dynasty once per turn. If it's in your hand, you can place it in your spell and trap zone as a face-up continuous spell. And then while it's a continuous spell, you can either pay 2,000 life points or reveal one Millennium Ankh and special summon it to your field. Then you can add a Millennium Ankh from your deck to your hand. So this actually searches out the Ankh, which is, in terms of this as an engine, pretty much the equivalent of Gemini Garnet, although I would say not even that good, because you don't actually have to run the Ankh. But it is specifically says until the end phase. It's not just banish this card until the end phase. So that is something to keep in mind with these two cards existing. They are very powerful and may catch you off guard if you are not aware of how the decks that some of them work. The next thing I want to bring up is actually an engine that, if you follow my community tab, you've already seen me mention that I'm very excited about, and it is the Millennium engine. This engine is actually a lot better, I think, than a lot of players give it credit for, although I would say not even that good, because you don't actually have to run the Ankh. But I feel like you may want to just to have like as a random discard and to prevent yourself from paying 6,000 life points, because these all have that effect to pay 2,000 or reveal Ankh, which is an incredible amount of life points to pay on turn 0 when things like Tenpai run around. So this can add Ankh. Obviously very good. If you want to know what Ankh does, it lets you reveal 5 forbidden monsters from your hand, deck, or face-up field. And then special summon 1 unstoppable Exodia monster from your extra deck, and then shuffle the rest of the monster cards you control into the deck, except for Exodia monsters whose level are 10 or higher, and Millennium monster cards, so it doesn't really do anything. It is literally just that it is a fusion spell that you can reveal for the effect of these 3 monsters. This is probably not going to be run, but if you are looking at this as an engine, you may want to consider 1 copy. Sengenigen lets you special summon it by paying 2,000, and then it searches for a Millennium monster from your deck. Golem that guards the Millennium treasures lets you special summon itself by revealing Ankh or paying 2,000, and then it adds Wedju Temple from deck to hand. Now what Wedju Temple does is that during your main phase, you can place a monster from your hand to your spell and trap zone as a continuous spell, then place 1 Millennium monster from your deck to your spell and trap zone as a continuous spell as well. If a face-up Millennium monster you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can place it to your spell and trap zone as a continuous spell instead of sending it to the graveyard. The important part here is actually that last sentence, in my opinion, that you can crystallize it instead of sending it to the graveyard. That means that this can work in any shifter deck because it ignores the graveyard. Instead of going to the graveyard, you just put it down there and you can summon them again on the following turn. If you were playing stuff like Ankh, you don't pay any life points. It's just a value engine. So if you're looking at any shifter deck that needs just extra beaters or bodies, that is an option. It's also just a stun option as well. You can just play these cards by themselves. They're just all earth monsters of various types and levels, attacks, and things like that. But this is just something to keep in mind. You may get caught off guard if your opponent is having a little bit of fun and they want to do those cards. Also, speaking of fun stuff, the Dark Magician, the Magician of Black Magic, makes the Dark Magician deck weirdly strong. Especially if they are playing Shining Sarcophagus cards. If they are playing Shining Sarcophagus, you can just special summon that card from your hand, and then if it's destroyed by a card effect, you can special summon a level 5 or higher, and there's... if it is destroyed by a card effect and a level 5 or higher monster is on the field, you can special summon that card, and then you can set 1 spell or trap from your deck that mentions Dark Magician. That is actually really important in the Shining Sarcophagus deck because it means that they can effectively make Dragoon on turn 0, or well, on your turn, because what they can do is they can summon this, you can do all their stuff, they summon Gandora G, they destroy this, they special summon it back, and then they set the Dark Magician Quick Play Fusion spell, and then on your turn, they can just summon the Dark Dragoon, and that gives them a negate, which is obviously really good. It's probably not the realest thing, but it is really cool to see that they gave more support to that sort of stuff in general. Just something quick to note. Other things that you may want to consider are, if you are playing Fiendsmith cards, as we already noted, you know, in many different decks over time, Rise to Full Height is obviously really good, but cards that you want to send with Beatrice, another one would be the Black Goat Laughs. That makes the Tenpai matchup even better. Also just makes those random matchups better. But with that in mind, actually, I don't have a copy in hand, but one thing that we have seen being discussed is sending monsters to the graveyard with Beatrice and then using a Constellar Ptolemy M7 to add the monster from graveyard to hand. That's a good way to search for any hand trap. So if you know you're playing against a deck that just hard loses to Droll and you're playing those cards, you can go ahead and send Droll. If you know you're playing against a deck that hard loses to Abyssal, you can do that. Things like that. But cards like the Black Goat Laughs are obviously going to be really beneficial and something you're going to want to keep in mind because they are going to be so easily accessible thanks to the Fiendsmith engine making Beatrice summonable basically for free. So cards like the Black Goat Laughs are going to be played a lot more and could be really detrimental to your deck if you aren't careful. Another thing that is really cool that I think hasn't gotten enough attention yet is Silhouette Rabbit plus Angel Statue Azure Rune. Now these cards are really cool. Silhouette Rabbit is a link to Illusion monster, which is obviously really cool. If it's link summoned, you can set a continuous trap from your deck that special summons itself as a monster, and then this card cannot be used as a link material for the turn, which is really cool. And then if a card in spell trap zone is summoned to the monster zone, except during the damage step, you can target one spell trap card your opponent controls and destroy it. That is actually really cool, because that means that if you summon this on turn 0 and you set this, if your opponent goes like Nightmare Throne, you just chain this special summon, and then on resolution you can pop the Nightmare Throne, or if they do it with Nightmare Pain, you can do it before they activate the ignition effect of Nightmare Pain. Obviously really cool. But the main reason for doing that is the Angel Statue, which you can special summon as an effect monster. It's a light fairy, level 4, 18 attack, 18 defense, so it's weirdly big. Once per turn, your opponent would special summon a monster or monsters. While this card is in your monster zone, you can send it to the graveyard. You can send one continuous trap in your monster zone that was special summoned from the spell and trap zone to the graveyard to negate the summon and destroy those monsters. When this card in the monster zone is destroyed by battle, you can destroy the monster that destroyed this card. So it's weirdly strong. It's a good way to prevent those like combo summons and like, you know, the link climb. It can prevent that, but it's also a really good just defensive card if you draw it on your own, which is really good to see. This is just something that a lot of decks can, you know, this is a 2-card package and they can just bring it in. If they don't have room in their extra deck, it's just 1 card in the extra deck and 1 card in the main deck, and then they have themselves a summon negation, which is really good. One other thing to keep in mind is that cards like Book of Eclipse may see an increase in play. Destructive Druma Karma Cannon is also in that same vein, because of the increase in monsters like Beatrice and just all of those monsters that can get flipped face down. Book of Eclipse might see an increase in play in that. It's also good against Tenpai. It is extremely beneficial to play going first and second, having a card like Eclipse that is that flexible. Board breakers in general may see an increase in play. I don't know how realistic it is to see somebody dedicate pretty much exclusively to board breakers, but cards like Evenly, which I historically don't think are very good. Dark Ruler, which is generally better than Droplet in my opinion, but Droplet might see play, or we'll see an increase in play as well. Book of Eclipse, Book of Moon, those kinds of cards all might see increases in play. Destructive Druma Karma Cannon, which I already mentioned, is a card you want to keep in mind if they're playing those kinds of cards when you're going second, because they can just simply flip it and then shut down your entire turn. And it's also good against Tenpai, for example, because it forces the player to make an action. So let's say you activate it, you set all your monsters, and then you can make them send all their monsters to the graveyard. That can come up, which is really important. But all these cards are going to probably see an uptick in playtime because they are really good at both going first and going second and into a variety of matchups. And they also answer Phantom of Yubel, which is something I think is really important to do, is to make sure that you can answer that Phantom, because that card, most of the way that people have been answering the setups lately have been with monster facts. Well, Phantom kind of ignores that, so having an out to that is important as well. To go along with that, the mention of Yubel is going to be the increase in the Bestials, because they are so popular thanks to not only the Yubel strategy, but the Fiendsmith cards themselves. Bestials are going to see an uptick in playtime. You should be aware that there will probably be 3 to 5 Bestial type monsters in almost every deck. Between DD Crow and the Bestials themselves, you can even see 6, depending on how much room they have. But those cards are going to be seeing an uptick in playtime as well. And then last but not least is a card I think that should probably see more playtime this weekend, not because it's a time card, but just because it stops the FTKs, the Gimmick Puppet offer, as well as the OTKs, the Tenpai offer, which is Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood. If you are playing a rogue strategy and you need time, literal turns, this card offers that to you, because they cannot kill you through it almost ever, which is really important to note. But those are the main cards I think that if you are not already aware of for the weekend, you should probably be aware of. If I had to mention any others, it would be, I'd say probably Golden Lord, Eldritch the Golden Lord, big fan of that card. Because of Runic Stun, if you're playing Snake Eyes, that could be a card you could consider, because it is a continuous method of removing their spells and traps without having to use cards like Cosmic Cyclone and things like that, which can be hit by Curse Steel, the Forbidden Spell. Other cards I would be very aware of are going to be the shifter decks, of course. You want to be aware of Molcharmy, all those kinds of things. Everybody is already aware of, but these were just some under-the-radar cards that I wanted to mention. Let me know down below if there's any other cards that you think we should mention going forward as well. After the WCQ, will be looking forward to making Millennium decks myself. Let me know what else you want to see going forward. I'm looking forward to the next season of Yu-Gi-Oh! And if you go to the WCQ and you see me, please come say hi. It's a last-second trip for me, so I might look a little stressed, but I would love to see everybody there. And until next time, have a great day.